And welcome back to today's Federal News Radio panel, Protecting the Frontline in Government Cyber Attacks, sponsored by Onapsis. I'm Larry Allen, your host today on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I have a great panel of government and industry experts here today to talk about protecting the frontline in government cyber attacks. I have Melinda Rogers, Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Justice; Kelley Dempsey, the Senior Information Security Specialist in Information Technology Laboratory at NIST; Bill Lay, the Chief Information Security Officer and Deputy CIO for Information Assurance at the Department of State; Lindy Burkhart, Senior Policy Advisor, Office of the Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity at DoD; and Alex Horan, Director of Product Management at Onapsis. Kelley Dempsey, during that break, we were talking about the fact that NIST implements guidance to agencies on a whole host of cyber-related issues and non-cyber issues as well. What are some of the things that you all have been proactive on lately in terms of guidance?
We do provide guidance and standards related to cybersecurity. And so one of the things we're working on really diligently right now is regarding security engineering and trying to get back to baking it in. So as security professionals, we've all heard, and been proponents of baking it in, don't bolt it on. And yet we're still finding systems, largely being designed with security as an afterthought. And so we have a special publication coming out, Special Publication 800-160, that is all about security engineering and how to use some of our other guidance that we've published, risk management framework related guidance, how to use that guidance and fold that into security engineering so that when you're developing systems, you're starting out with your stakeholders, getting their security requirements, and making sure that those get implemented within systems as you're developing them.
That's interesting. Frankly, it's kind of an answer different from the one I had expected. So let me follow up a little bit.
Okay.
My background, procurement and contracting, and what I assumed you would say is, these people, when they go out to buy things, Larry, but you're talking about, even before you get to that, it's the technical aspects that agencies need to be looking at. So there's some technical education that's needed, isn't there? There
is, and definitely before you go out to acquisition and start talking to vendors or your own in-house developers, you definitely need to get with your stakeholders and make sure they understand about security and get their security requirements, understand what the system is going to do, what type of information, what the impact of the information it's going to process, store, or transmit. All of that should be done well before you move on to the acquisition phase.
And do you all communicate with the acquisition community on any of these standards, guidance?
Standards and guidance, but well, we certainly have the acquisition community. We've certainly been socializing Special Publication 800-160 with a large group of varied group of organizations. So I can't say that we're working directly with acquisition organizations, though.
Well, it also seems like your upfront focus, again, is more on the technical where perhaps it needs to be. So.
Right. I mean, with acquisitions, hopefully they'll be acquiring what you ask them to acquire based on your development, specifications. So, so it's important to go to them with those things, more or less fully developed.
Melinda Rogers from Department of Justice, after NIST puts out its guidance, you all still have to compete for these types of cyber solutions with other agency IT priorities. And even though at the top of the show we referenced the fact that cyber is often the #1 priority, it still doesn't mean that you have unlimited funds. You have to compete inside your own agency for different priorities. Tell us a little bit about how that process works at your agency.
Sure. Ultimately, it is still about the mission. The mission still has to come first. The Department of Justice, our mission it's law enforcement, it is litigation and incarceration. That comes first. But from, at least within the Department of Justice, in the cybersecurity community, our job is to ultimately enable the mission owners to be able to execute upon their priorities. And our mission within cybersecurity is to minimize the potential disruption that could come into play that would affect these mission owners. And I think ultimately the two sides have to be working together. It cannot be a trade-off between mission and security. Those two must find a way to coexist. We can balance each other out. It is about risk management. We talked about that earlier. There are times where you could potentially have a vulnerability that might cost you X to fix, but the actual implication or the potential loss is actually, 1/10 of that. So it's a trade-off. Sometimes it's a risk management decision that one has to make. It's not a trade-off per se, but it is a balancing act that security and mission must work closely together. And I actually agree with what Kelley said. I mean, we need to continue to work on not bolting security on after the fact. We need to bake it in even before the system development, before the development piece. It should be baked into the ideation phase, especially in today's day and age when we're looking at really the dissolution of our perimeter. It's not so much the traditional, the moat, if you will. It's the mobile devices. It's leveraging cloud capabilities. How do we effectively leverage cloud capabilities and yet still retain ownership and monitoring of our data, of our assets, as we rely on some of these external vendors to help us more effectively manage our IT?
And Bill Lay, I know that the State Department has its own challenges as well in terms of getting the cyber word out in terms of states' organic mission. Tell us a little bit about what your challenges are in that environment.
We've talked several times about setting priorities. And that is critical. It's critical to get focused and get your plan together so everybody can rally around the plan. But setting priorities is difficult. It's not an easy task. What that usually entails is once you have a plan and your priorities, then you end up in a reverse planning cycle of finding that many of your hardware and software devices in production are not compatible with that priority and that plan. And so you may have to back up a dozen steps just to get to a place where you can start. And that can be discerning for a lot of people because they see immediately, well, this is going to take forever. Well, hopefully forever comes quickly. But it can be challenging. One of the things I really stress with the vendor community is play nicely with others. Probably the quickest way to get your tool off a production platform is if it's incompatible with most of the other tools on the production platform. They have to be interoperable. We have to get away from proprietary standards. We have to adopt open standards like sticks and taxis so that we can bring in new products without having to reinvent the wheel just to get to where we think we need to be.
Alex Horan, that sounds like a challenge for the vendor community. Vendors certainly want to be responsive to their customer community, but they also, everybody likes to think they have their own secret sauce. Tell us a little bit about how your company reacts to that. And also, if we know that cyber has to compete with other priorities, how do you go about showing your return on investment for your clients?
Sure, that's a great question. That's a great question, and it's also a big challenge. Yeah, as a vendor, we feel we offer, or we know we offer the best solution, but it doesn't matter if the organization doesn't feel they have the problem that the solution resolves, or doesn't feel that problem's a priority. So how do you illustrate they have the problem without using FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like being a negative campaigner to show this? And even, for example, the subject line of today's session, which is securing the front lines. What we work on is ERP systems, mission-critical systems that aren't necessarily the front lines, but they're the supply chain to your front line. A secure front line means nothing if the supply chain breaks down and you can't maintain that front line. So it's kind of helping to educate people in the sense of explaining why this problem, which they just haven't been focused on because the front line gets all the attention, really merits that attention, merits that implementation of at least understanding the risk and then making an informed decision about, no, we can live with this back-end risk, or no, this is too important for us. So it's a real challenge. It's a challenge that I quite enjoy, is finding a way without trying to scare people about, no, this is something systemic inside an organization. I agree that security should be baked in, but third-party products, especially more kind of legacy products or products that have a history of having to be interoperable with everything else, often that design means it's open, like it's available, it wants to set up easily. So with ERP systems, SAP systems, it's not secure by design. You need to come in and apply some knowledge, which is what we sell in our product, to maintain the right level of security inside an organization. So it's a challenge, it's a fun challenge, but the key, I think, is raising awareness for everyone so organizations ultimately make the right decision for them.
Wendy Burkhart from the Department of Defense, you probably have some unique insights on this in terms of the defense mission. I'd love to get your insight on this topic.
So one thing I think wraps all of us here at the table together that is our partnership with industry and using the NIST guidance, which is the foundation. I think, I work with these folks and see these different organizations probably on a monthly basis. And one thing I know that the Department of Defense is very interested in is partnerships, whether it be mission partners or industry partners. And the work we're doing with NIST and the guidance and the foundation that Kelley spoke to, and the best practices from industries. Really, whether we're industry, the Department of Defense, Justice, State, we all have a goal, and achieving that goal is based on the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of our information. Strategically writ large, I think that kind of hits everybody. So in a sense, we're not completely unique. So if we can take best practices from industry, and industry understands the guidance and the foundation of baking in cybersecurity and security controls, they understand how we get to our mission accomplishment, then that can become a standard in industry that both and the government can use. It's more cost effective. It's a quicker return on investment. The adversary, I said, isn't completely, the cyber adversary is very agile and very responsive. And in the Department of Defense, our budget cycle, if you put a new start, you're going to see the funding in probably about 2 years. That doesn't fight our cyber adversary. That does not help us defend ourselves against our adversary. They're turning on a dime. So I think what we're discussing here, and I would love to not have missed by the audience, is the collaboration in the work we're doing. It's not independent efforts. It's building. It's taking Kelley and NIST and building to a point where DOD can pick what they need for our specific mission, Justice can pick what they need for their specific mission, industry can come up with best practices, whether it's commercial, DOD, or Justice, and develop solutions that we all can use more cost effectively.
And you touched on, I think, perhaps the critical thing that we really haven't discussed so much today, so let's do that now. That's budgets. Melinda Melinda Rogers from the Department of Justice. Lindy mentioned the budget constraints. We are at this point planning for the FY17 budget cycle. Tell us a little bit about how you all have gone through that process, and does it really take approximately 2 years to get up and cycled?
Thank you, Larry. So yes, it is a 2-year budgetary cycle. We are actually planning for 18 right now. So that I would say, yes, it is a challenge. It is not something that cannot be overcome, but it is a layer of complexity that all of us have to deal with. What we have to do is be forward thinking too, as we think about what we're going to put in the line items for fiscal year 18. They range all the way from what do we need to do to further enhance our security architecture to so looking ahead in terms of potential new capabilities that we need to have put in, as well as technological refresh, right? Tech refresh. One of the challenges we talked about with Bill earlier is the legacy system. So we need to work that into the budget cycle as well. Anticipate when we need to have new equipment in place as well as new capabilities. It's much like forecasting in any other business. You look at the market environment, you look at the threats that exist, you look at the capabilities, you do your best in putting that together, and hopefully, hope is not a strategy, but if you are thoughtful in what you put together, you should be on track. And there will always be those extenuating circumstances like the breach that we saw last year, or the breaches that we saw last year, at least those that are that hit the press, right? So those will always come in. And hopefully what you have done is put together a good environment already where you do have reasonable end-to-end security measures in place, like Kelley talked about, the risk management approach, and that anything that comes in out of the left field, you can still handle while maintaining your business operations.
So budgets, of course, a key concept. It takes a while. The agencies have to put together. You referenced the fact you're working on the FY18 budget cycle now. Each agency will submit its requests to the Office of Management and Budget. Those will end up being promulgated in the FY18 budget requests that the next president will put forward to Congress. And then, of course, Congress has the opportunity to reprioritize and appropriate as they see fit. So yet again, another difficult challenge. I want to thank our guests today for coming and speaking on the panel Protecting the Front Line in Government Cyber Attacks, sponsored by Onapsis, here on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM, and federalnewsradio.com. I'm Larry Allen, your moderator. I want to thank my guest panelists today, Melinda Rogers, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Justice, Kelley Dempsey, Senior Information Security Specialist at NIST, Bill Lay, the Chief Information Security Officer and Deputy CIO at the Department of State, Lindy Burkhart, Senior Policy Advisor, Office of the Deputy CIO at the Department of Defense, and Alex Horan, Director of Product Management at Onapsis. Panelists, thank you very much.
On behalf of Onapsis, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.